Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Geostrategic Pulse. Thank you for watching or listening to the podcast. What if one of the smallest missile deals of the year is actually sending one of the biggest strategic messages in the Indo-Pacific? Singapore has quietly approved a new U.S. Hellfire missile package, but this isn't just about buying more weapons. It's about deterrence, military readiness, and the growing rivalry between the United States and China in one of the world's most critical regions. So why is this seemingly routine deal attracting global attention? Before we break it all down, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss our latest defense and geopolitical analysis. If you find this video insightful, share it with someone who follows global security. And here's today's question for you. Is Singapore simply maintaining its defenses, or is this another sign that tensions in the Indo-Pacific are entering a new phase? Drop your opinion in the comments below. There are strong arguments on both sides, and we genuinely like to hear your perspective. Let's get into it.
Yeah, so to set the baseline here with the latest info, we're looking at a $22.3 million package. It's an AGM-114R Hellfire missile package, and it's heading to Singapore.
Right, which, I mean, is a pretty specific number.
It is. Breaking that down, it actually combines an older $12.4 million package with a newer request for 24 more missiles. So that brings the total up to 67 missiles.
Okay, so 67 missiles total.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The U.S. State Department formally notified Congress, and Lockheed Martin out of Orlando is stepping in as the prime contractor.
Yeah.
And it's not just the missiles.
Oh.
You know, it includes spare parts, technical manuals, and this is super important software calibration for their launchers.
Got it. So our mission for this deep dive is to basically look past that price tag, right? Because in the realm of global defense spending, where, a single modern fighter jet can easily cost upwards of $100 million.
Oh, easily.
Right. So a $22 million transaction is practically a rounding error. It's just an incredibly modest purchase.
Yeah, basically.
It looks like Singapore is fundamentally just restocking ammunition and updating maintenance protocols for their existing fleet. They have, 19 or 20 of those AH-64D Apache longbow helicopters?
Yeah, right around there.
Okay. So we need to figure out why this routine transaction is actually, a masterclass in geostrategy. We're going to get into operational readiness, why older airframes need massive software updates, and how all this helps Singapore navigate that huge superpower competition in the Indo-Pacific.
Right. And honestly, the modest size of this deal, that is the core of its strategic value.
How so?
Well, look at the rest of the region. The latest updates show this massive wave of really flashy, multi-billion-dollar military modernizations. I mean, nations are buying entirely new classes of submarines, next-generation stealth fighters.
Everyone's expanding.
Exactly. But Singapore, on the other hand, is deliberately opting for this package that heavily features 5 years of software calibration and reprogramming services for their M299 launchers.
Yeah, I was looking at that. It reminds me of having, a 10-year-old high-performance sports car. If you want to compete today, you don't necessarily throw out the car and buy a brand new engine.
Right. Yeah.
You update the computer mapping, you put in highly advanced transmission software, swap out for modern racing tires. The chassis is older, sure, but the digital brain running it is cutting edge.
That is basically a perfect analogy, because the M299 launcher on an Apache, it isn't just a dumb metal rack holding a missile.
It's doing work.
Yeah, it functions as the digital bridge between the helicopter's targeting computers and the missile itself. So reprogramming that launcher means rewriting the code so the missile can interpret the newest, most complex radar signatures out there.
Because the threats are changing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If a potential adversary upgrades the electronic jamming on their naval vessels, Singapore's older Apaches need immediate software patches to literally see through that jamming and guide the Hellfire to the target. That is what this $22 million is actually buying.
Which translates to that concept you hear defense analysts throw around a lot, capability management.
Yes, exactly.
Which, in plain English, just means a military would much rather have a slightly older weapon system that works 100% of the time, rather than, a brand new experimental system that spends 6 months of the year in the repair shop.
Right. They are actively avoiding the massive disruptions that always come with completely swapping out your gear.
Because that downtime is dangerous.
Extremely dangerous. Introducing a totally new weapons platform creates this massive period of vulnerability. Mechanics have to basically unlearn decades of knowledge, master a brand new supply chain.
Oh, right, the logistics side.
Yeah, and the pilots.
Yeah.
They have to be retrained from the ground up. You're building new hangars, writing new combat doctrines. A sustainment-based approach completely skips that downtime. By systematically investing in the digital architecture of a mature platform like the Apache, Singapore ensures their fleet never actually experiences a dip in readiness.
Okay, let's talk about why that constant readiness is so vital for them, which naturally brings us to geography.
Yeah, the map tells the whole story here.
Exactly. Like, if you are listening to this and wondering why a $22 million helicopter upgrade in Southeast Asia matters to you, you just have to look at where these helicopters are parked. Singapore sits directly at the choke point of the Straits of Malacca and the South China Sea.
The busiest waters on Earth.
Yeah. Roughly a third of all global shipping passes through that specific corridor. If a conflict shuts down that airspace just because a regional military couldn't maintain its defensive posture, the cost of electronics in your house or the gas in your car skyrockets almost overnight.
The geographic constraints on Singapore are just incredibly severe. I mean, it's an island nation of about 280 square miles. There's absolutely zero strategic depth.
They can't back up.
No, not at all. In military terms, that means if a conflict erupts, they do not have hundreds of miles of mountains or plains to retreat into to absorb an initial strike. They operate on the absolute front line from the very first second of any engagement.
Wow.
So that reality absolutely dictates a rapid response posture. They rely heavily on platforms like these Apaches at Sembawang Air Base. They can literally get into the air in minutes, not hours.
Okay, here's where I have to push back a little on the core logic of this purchase, though. Because when you look at the latest updates from conflicts in Eastern Europe or the Middle East, there is a massive, undeniable pivot toward unmanned systems.
Right, the drone revolution.
Yeah. Cheap drones and loitering munitions are destroying multi-million-dollar tanks and radar systems every single day.
They are.
So if you need to defend a narrow maritime choke point on a budget, why spend $22 million on 67 missiles for manned helicopters? Why not just buy, like, 1,000 cheap loitering munitions?
Yeah.
Relying on a human pilot in an Apache feels incredibly retro in 2026.
It's a great question, and it's honestly a friction point defense planners are wrestling with all over the globe right now. Drones have permanently altered the battlefield, especially regarding cost asymmetry.
Right, trading a $1,000 drone for a $1 million tank.
Exactly. Yeah. But a loitering munition cannot replicate the specific dynamic capabilities of a manned AH-64D Apache integrated with an AGM-114R Hellfire, especially in the very specific environments Singapore is defending.
How so? Because I mean, a drone can loiter in the sky for 20 hours waiting for a target, while an Apache has to fly back for fuel eventually.
True. But it comes down to processing power, payload, and the speed of decision-making in a multi-domain environment. The Apache's longbow radar, it can detect and track over 100 targets simultaneously.
100 targets at once.
Yes, and it classifies them by threat level in seconds. When you are operating in a highly congested maritime zone like the Straits of Malacca, where civilian supertankers are totally mixed in with potential naval threats, you absolutely need a human in the loop processing that radar data in real time.
Making those split-second calls.
Exactly. And furthermore, the Roneo variant of the Hellfire missile that's in this package, it has a multi-purpose warhead.
What does that mean in practice?
It means the pilot can digitally select the fuse setting mid-flight. They can literally tell the missile to penetrate a heavily armored naval vessel before detonating. Or, this is wild, they can tell it to detonate in the air to take out a swarm of fast attack boats.
Oh, wow. So it's super adaptable.
Very. A swarm of cheap drones simply does not have that localized heavy armor penetrating payload combined with that level of split-second adaptability.
Okay, that makes the technical strategy much clearer. A drone is a fantastic sniper rifle, but the Apache is a heavily armored command center that just happens to carry bunker-busting payloads.
That's a really good way to put it.
And looking at the rest of this package, they are heavily focused on making sure that Command Center survives. The latest info highlights the inclusion of chaff, flares, and continuous software verification.
Yeah, survivability is key.
Because flying a helicopter designed in the late 20th century against modern air defenses of the 2020s, that's incredibly dangerous. They're basically buying the electronic warfare countermeasures to keep those pilots alive long enough to actually fire those 67 missiles.
Right, and survival in a modern threat environment requires constant evolution of those countermeasures. The threat libraries, which are basically the code that tells the helicopter's defensive systems when to deploy flares or jam an incoming signal, they have to be updated constantly.
Almost like antivirus software.
Precisely. If you lose access to those software updates, your multi-million-dollar helicopter just becomes a highly viewable, very slow target.
Which introduces the geopolitical tightrope Singapore is walking here. To get those software updates, to keep the M299 launchers calibrated and the threat libraries totally current, they are relying entirely on the United States.
They are.
Through this foreign military sales framework, Singapore is locking itself deeply into the U.S. defense ecosystem. They are adopting American logistics standards and software environments. It's literally like committing entirely to the Apple ecosystem, but for weapons.
Yeah, it creates a very deep institutional linkage. When you synchronize your military's digital infrastructure and your sustainment routes with Washington, you are inherently aligning your operational capabilities with American strategic interests.
But Singapore is famously unaligned by treaty. They are not an official U.S. treaty ally like Japan or South Korea.
No, they aren't.
So how do they balance this? How do they have this deep, absolute reliance on American military software without alienating China? Because obviously, Beijing is scrutinizing every single military transaction in the South China Sea corridor.
Well, the mechanism that allows this balance is the very specific structure of the maintenance agreement itself. A defining feature of this $22.3 million package is that it explicitly requires 0 additional permanent U.S. military personnel or contractors to be stationed in Singapore.
Wait, 0. So they get the American software and the American munitions, but they don't need any American boots on the ground to make it work.
None. Singapore has spent decades building up a highly mature, localized technical ecosystem. They have the domestic engineering capability to physically maintain these systems, integrate the software patches, and calibrate the hardware entirely independently.
That's impressive.
Yeah, they rely on the U.S. for the initial data and the physical munitions, but the actual execution and the day-to-day sustainment, that is handled totally locally.
I mean, that is a massive diplomatic distinction. It allows them to look at Beijing and say, hey, we are simply maintaining our own defensive capabilities with 0 foreign troop buildup on our soil.
Exactly.
While simultaneously looking at Washington and proving they are a highly interoperable, hyper-competent partner in a really critical maritime zone.
Well, Washington benefits immensely from this arrangement, too.
Yeah.
Without the massive political and financial cost of building a new base.
Right. Bases are expensive.
Very. The U.S. State Department gains a reliable, highly capable security node situated directly on the world's most vital trade route. As strategic competition with China intensifies, the U.S. doesn't necessarily need more of its own ships patrolling every square inch of the Pacific.
They just need regional partners.
Exactly. They need regional partners whose logistics and software can seamlessly integrate with American forces in a crisis.
It really redefines how we measure military credibility. For decades, deterrence was just a simple numbers game, right? You counted the number of tanks, tallied up the fighter jets, and whoever had the bigger spreadsheet was considered the dominant force.
Right, the old Cold War metric.
Yeah. But this deep dive into a relatively tiny $22 million sustainment package reveals a totally different metric for modern warfare.
It does.
Yeah.
The sheer number of weapons a country possesses on paper is rapidly becoming a secondary metric. Yeah. When we look at recent supply chain failures globally, we see supposedly powerful militaries just paralyzed because they can't source replacement parts or update their targeting software. The new benchmark of combat credibility is logistical resilience.
Logistical resilience.
Yes, a fleet of 20 older helicopters that are flawlessly maintained, carrying fully calibrated munitions, and capable of launching within a 10-minute window. That provides far more genuine deterrence than a fleet of 60 highly experimental aircraft that are just grounded due to a lack of spare parts.
It's the unglamorous reality of modern geopolitics. Buying the shiny new jet is what gets the headlines, sure, but consistently paying for the software patches, the manual translations, and the launcher reprogramming, that is what actually secures the airspace. Which leaves you with a final, slightly provocative thought to consider. If the future of global security in places like the Indo-Pacific is going to be dictated by which nations can independently sustain and update their existing hardware without needing a foreign superpower to hold their hand, how vulnerable are the countries right now that are draining their budgets on massive, flashy military expansions?
Right, while completely neglecting the unglamorous mechanics of long-term supply chains.
Exactly. The next time you see a headline about a multi-billion-dollar weapons purchase, ask yourself who is actually going to be doing the software updates 5 years from now.
It's a great question.
Thank you all for listening or watching. We hope you enjoyed this deep dive, and we warmly invite you to check out our other podcasts for more insights into the mechanics and strategies shaping global security. Catch you next time.